welcome back to Barking Penguins. Arr, arr. Well, a fascinating story here, because this time last week, while the rest of us were all sitting here and watching me vent my spleen out at the rest of the Rail Canyon stage, I was actually not here, or rather, I was here incorporeally. Now, am I saying that I am an otherworldly spirit that exists in a different realm of existence? Yes, but that's not why I was in a different realm. I was actually in the town, little-known town called Pittsburgh, for what was billed as a mac and cheese festival. Now, essentially, what this was like sort of one of those things, you know, those sort of like Facebook events that pop up in your feed that just happen to show up randomly, and you don't really know what they are or what they're supposed to be, but you're just kind of like, oh, this has like a passing interest or whatever. You just kind of go, oh, maybe I'll check that out, or, you know, and not thinking you're ever going to do it, but because it is there, you're just like, well, whatever, I'll say interested. Well, I did this for this thing. It was a mac and cheese festival. For those of you who aren't aware by now, macaroni and cheese is my personal favorite food dish. It's my favorite thing to eat, and so I thought to myself, hey, a festival dedicated to mac and cheese. It's going to have a bunch of different vendors and food trucks displaying their own different kinds of recipes for this and that. I thought to myself, doesn't sound like a bad time. But it was not something I was really thinking I was going to go attend, because it was like, well, what do you do with that? Until my mother saw on Facebook that I was interested in the event, and she went, oh, I want to go. So we ended up going. It was me, my mother, my stepfather, and my step-siblings, and we went off to this mac and cheese festival. And I'm going to try to relate some of the experience for you, because I think it was an interesting tale to tell. So, in essence, we got to this place called the Highmark Stadium. Now, me having been born in Pittsburgh, that was nonsense, by the way, but I'm not addressing that right now. Me having been born in Pittsburgh but raised in West Virginia, I don't really consider myself a Pittsburgh native. I consider myself someone whose roots and origins lie within Pittsburgh, but not really, you know, I'm not from Pittsburgh, so I didn't really know too much of the landscape. Now, I knew Station Square, which was the sort of shopping district that this was going to be taking place in. And I knew that the three, I guess, big sport arenas in Pittsburgh were Heinz Field for the Steelers football team, PNC Park for the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team, and I believe what is now called the PPG Paints Arena, which is ostensibly for both the Pens, the Penguins, and hockey, and also like where most of the big name concerts are held. And I've gone to the arena many times to see people like McCartney and The Who and Roger Waters and, you know, all these, you know, artists who I've grown up admiring so much. I have seen them live there. Never ever heard of the Highmark Stadium, and that was fascinating. What I discovered is that it's actually for Pittsburgh's soccer team, which I didn't even know Pittsburgh had a soccer team, but apparently they did. It was probably the tiniest of all the sporting venues in town, because it was like just a little tiny soccer field and a set of bleachers surrounding the place. So it wasn't. I definitely was not expecting to see ESPN broadcasting out of there anytime soon. But we got there, and it was like all these different food trucks and vendors and tents, and, you know, you would think that as we fast approach now the autumn season and the autumn weather, that temperatures would have been within like the 50s or the 60s in Fahrenheit. Not so, actually. We ended up being there in 84-degree weather. And, you know, I've talked about this on a different show before, but the thing is that festivals, it doesn't matter what kind of festival you're putting together, festivals are the most difficult thing to organize, and organize well. There was the great thing that was the big story, I think, of earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, but it was, they had the two opposing Fyre Fest documentaries coming out, and I'm not going to go into what Fyre Fest is, because, again, there's two documentaries about it out now. Not hard to figure out what that's about, but they had the whole Fyre Fest documentary thing, and my main takeaway from that was that almost every festival that happens anywhere is like a miracle that it happens at all. Any convention, any like mass public gathering, if you can get a mass of people together in one spot, then they all walk away happy and satisfied, you have performed, the work of God right there, because that is something that is incredibly easy to screw up and get wrong. So, we got there, and it was 84 degrees, and I really honestly think that they were not expecting the amount of people that showed up there. Because after about the first half an hour, the lines to get into anywhere were insanely long. I mean, you would be in what was essentially like 45-minute long lines to then receive what were essentially Dixie Cup-sized samples of stuff. Like, let me be clear as well, too. For a place dubbed a Mac and Cheese Festival, you would have thought that they'd have been offering up, like, hearty handfuls of mac and cheese, like dinner plate sort of stuff, right? Or at the very least, like sort of, polyester bowls of stuff. Not so. This was essentially like little, the sort of like cups that you get nacho cheese in. They would pour like a little spoonful of something into that. And this would be on a system where you would walk up to the vendor and you would have those like carnival fairground ticket stubs. You would hand them a food ticket, and then they would give you a little Dixie cup sized portion of mac and cheese, and that was supposed to be filling. And like these empty carbs, and they give you this much, and it's supposed to be filling. You'd been waiting for 45 minutes for that in 84-degree heat, and you would only get one drink ticket as well. So you only had one free drink, by which point everything else was like you had to pay $3 for water and I think $6 for soda, and then like they were making cocktails, and they had like sort of Mike's Hard Lemonade kind of stuff, except it was the Jack Daniels offshoot of that, and like they were selling those as well, and it was just so like it was one of those scenarios where I think I would have had more fun if the temperature had been cooler, but because it was so hot, it actually ripped away my appetite, and I didn't really have as much mac and cheese there as I would have expected. And the big thing as well, I think the big clincher, which is going to really drive home the sort of like empty chintziness of it, because it was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. But I think the quote rip-off angle of it really came in the form of the fact that all of this to pay for what was essentially 45-minute long waiting lines to stand in 84-degree weather for a Dixie cup-sized portion of mac and cheese, and pay for water to keep yourself hydrated in this crazy heat. This, all in all, cost me $50 per person, because it was general admission tickets being run through Ticketmaster of all places. So it was $50 a person, and I went in a caravan of about 6 or 7 people, I would say. So yeah, it was just 6 of us. So 50 times 6 is like $300, I believe, plus tax. So over $300, and it was really something else, I'm gotta tell you. We ended up walking away from that, and then finding ourselves going up, for those of you who know Pittsburgh and know Station Square, we went up this like sort of incline place to a sort of neighborhood community that was up on this giant hill. And they had a street fair there. And I think that was actually more exciting and fulfilling than the Mac and Cheese Festival itself, which I was not expecting myself to say, but that was what we ended up doing. And by the end of that day, I was just completely energy depleted, and I ended up spending the rest of the day in bed. I got home at like 6, and I just spent the rest of the day in bed because I just could not keep my head above water at that point. And actually, I didn't want to keep my head above water because I was so hot and exhausted that I needed to just, like dunk my head in the sink and get a nice, cool, refreshing burst. But that was my weekend, last weekend, and now I guess I should briefly talk about what's been happening here, I guess. So we're now out of the Grand Canyon and into what is supposed to be, I think they called this a jungle, but it's more reminiscent of a swamp. I like, this is very marshy sort of frog stuff. Every level, as you would note by now, I think this is a common thing with Sonic, but every sort of stage and level has its own little unique gimmick. You always start off with a beach level, and then that always leads into an industrial level. Those will always be the two staples of Sonic that will never die. And then from there, you had the casino level where the big, let's see here, what was the big thing of the beach level? Nothing much, really. That was a tutorial. Then the industrial level had, like, the fireballs and the laser railways, which, like, would make you run fast. Then the casino level had the pinball, like, mechanic, which didn't work properly at all. And then the Grand Canyon had the light rail grinding system, which didn't work well at all. And now this has basically got an odd power-up system with frogs. But, oh, the level's over. Well, that's a twist. If you like what you've heard, be sure to hit the subscribe button, ding the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Smash the like button, share the video with your friends. On the screen, you'll see more episodes of The Gaming Weekend and more episodes of Nick's Serenade to Caffeine. And I guess I'll talk about this game more in the next episode. Bye-bye!